So your acting career has been slow and steady at times, but you had a recurring role on Seinfeld. Then you discovered TikTok, and now you're a genuine star. You're bigger than Jerry Seinfeld right now. Does that feel weird?
I don't know. I don't know if that's true, but it does feel weird. And I love it. I love the attention. I was just in New York at a Broadway musical, and during the intermission, I was out in the lobby and I was surrounded by hordes of my young friends. Oh, can we get a selfie? Can we get a selfie? And I could see the people who were not on TikTok looking and they must have been wondering, who's that little old lady who's getting all that attention? Who is she?
Hello again, and welcome to another episode of Stories from Real Life. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards. Thanks for joining me for the podcast where personal stories can have a global impact. As you heard in the intro, our guest today is actress, author of The Book of Annie, and TikTok star Annie Korzen. Annie, welcome to the show today.
Nice to be here.
So my first question is a little bit detailed, so if you could listen closely for the details. You didn't start acting until you were in your 30s, and in your first credited acting role, you played a homeless woman in a satirical movie called Foreplay. That was 50 years ago, and you currently have a couple of projects that are now in post-production. And one of those is called Just Below Sunset, and you play a homeless woman. Does
I
that
don't
feel
know
like a
where you
full?
get all this information. You must have spent hours researching me. I don't even know
I
all this
prepare
stuff.
for every guest. So does that feel like a full circle moment for you to play a homeless person 50 years ago and 50 years now?
That is so funny because the truth is so different from the popular fact. I did start out by playing a homeless person. That's true. That's true that I forgot all about it. But the recent credit is totally bogus. I
Really?
was hired to do the movie and then I never did it. But for some reason, IMDb got my credit. So I have a credit in a movie that I never worked on that I never got paid for.
Wow.
So that's showbiz, right? You can't trust anything. I mean, it states right there on IMDb that I'm in this movie. I've never even seen it, but I probably would be cast to play a homeless person. I'll tell you something. I mean, I'm jumping into something. Is this too soon to jump into something?
Go right ahead.
My one of the sad things about my career is I am considered in Hollywood. I'm considered ugly. They say character actress. The fact is, if a casting call went out today for an attractive older woman, I would never be seen. Uh, because they say I'm too ethnic. What they really mean is I'm too Jewish looking. And Jewish looking is considered on women, not men. On women is considered unattractive in Hollywood. So I've always had to deal with that. So yeah, I play homeless people. I play obnoxious mothers-in-law. I've been kind of stereotyped into a certain kind of role because of my looks. So this whole TikTok thing where people are telling me I'm beautiful, this is a new experience for me. I've never in my life, I'm 86 years old. This is the first time in my life that I'm being told that I'm beautiful.
You paid your dues. Now you're enjoying the rewards.
Something like that. Right. Right.
So your acting career has been slow and steady at times, but you had a recurring role on Seinfeld. When you discovered TikTok, or then you discovered TikTok, and now you're a genuine star. You're bigger than Jerry Seinfeld right now. Does that feel weird?
I don't know. I don't know if that's true, but it does feel weird. And I love it. I love the attention. I was just in New York at a Broadway musical, and during the intermission, I was out in the lobby and I was surrounded by hordes of my young friends. Oh, can we get a selfie? Can we get a selfie? And I could see the people who were not on TikTok looking and they must have been wondering, who's that little old lady who's getting all that attention? Who is she? And I do appreciate it. I do. And I enjoy it. I do enjoy it, I have to say. It's not something I've been a bit player all my life. I've always felt I had something to offer and I couldn't get anybody to listen to me. So this has been quite a miraculous adventure.
Nice. So you played two different characters on Seinfeld, and you weren't homeless in
Oh,
either
you're
one.
unbelievable.
You weren't homeless in either one. So, how did you get
No,
those
but I was
roles?
obnoxious. But I was obnoxious in both. Yes, I'm very proud of the fact that I played two different characters. A negative way to look at it might be that my first character was so insignificant that it didn't matter that I did a second one because the audience wouldn't know. Although I shouldn't say that because I have one or two friends who also did two characters. They were very generous in that way, that show. By the way, it was a very nice show to work on. People were nice. You know, when you work on a TV show, kind of the atmosphere comes from the top. And fortunately, Jerry Seinfeld is a very decent and nice human being. So everybody was treated with respect. Everybody was made to feel comfortable. I mean, as comfortable as you can feel when you're an occasional bit player going in on a set where they already have established a family. It's not an easy thing to do. People don't realize that. It's not an easy thing to do.
So let's talk about your book a little bit. It was released
Okay.
recently, and it's called "The Book of Annie: Humor, Heart, and Chutzpah from an Accidental Influencer."
Oh,
When?
look, I happen to have a
Yes,
copy right here.
right there on the video. So, when did you learn that storytelling was your passion?
Uh, that's a good question. Well, I've always, as I say, I was brought up to think that I was unattractive as a woman. So I thought, well, maybe I better develop other skills. And I learned that I could make people laugh, that I could be funny, and I had some brains. And so, in a way, I've been a storyteller all my life. But then when I started writing, um, I did some solo shows for myself and I wrote my own material. And I discovered it very free and very liberating to speak your own words. I mean, I'm happy to be hired as an actor and to speak lines that have been written by somebody else. But what I really love most in the world is to speak my own words. And are you familiar with The Moth? Do you know The Moth, the storytelling organization?
Familiar with the moth? Yes.
Well, I've worked with the Moth and I've toured with them. And I would say, of anything I've ever done in my professional life, nothing is more thrilling than being on stage. My best one was we did it at the Shubert Theater in Boston. So I think it's the oldest theater in New York. Beautiful old red velvet theater. And telling my story in my words to a sold out house of people who love hearing stories. It's a big thrill. That's really what I love to do.
So, how come you never wrote a book before now?
Actually, I did, but I can't find it anywhere. I wrote one many years ago about thrifting. Thrifting is one of my big topics. I talk about it a lot, about how I basically live without spending money, if I can help it. And so I wrote a book called Bargain Junkie, Living the Good Life on the Cheap. But it went out of print and I couldn't figure out how to deal with Amazon. So you can't buy it anywhere. So I don't talk about it. But this is actually my second book. But you know something, Melvin? I started out doing improv as an actor. I belonged to a little improv. And when you do improv, comedy improv as an actor, I realized after a while that basically that was a form of writing. I was writing on my feet. I just wasn't putting it down to pen and paper. So that's when I realized that, hey, why don't I just start writing stuff? And I love stories. I love telling short personal stories. I even teach that. People come to me. I've even started teaching it on the college level, called Creating the Personal Humorous Essay. It's a new art form. I don't know if you know David Sedaris or Anne Lamott. Uh, it's a new literary art form, the personal humorous essay. And I love it. I love it.
So, where do you teach, and how often?
I teach, well, I've always taught, but on a personal level. I mean, I've coached, but these were other writers who wanted to know more, who were working on stories, personal stories. But this is for Emerson University, or is it college? I don't know if they're a university.
I think
It's
it's college.
I think it's college.
And in
And
Boston.
well, the funny thing is they have an LA
Okay.
campus.
Okay.
So I teach there. It's just a 3 day seminar, 3 day workshop on, as I say, and these are for kids who are getting a degree in comedy arts. I didn't even know there. What did you know that there's such a thing
I did
now?
not. I did
You can
not
get
know
a
that.
degree in comedy arts, which I think is kind of funny to start with. But and so we do a 3-day seminar in learning how to tell your own story. Because these kids, they want to be stand-ups, they want to be TV directors, they want to be comedy writers. You can't do any of those things if you don't know how to tell a story.
Absolutely. So, is that part of your growing brand as a grand influencer?
Ah, you mean teaching? I hope so, because I love doing it. I love teaching. Teaching is very close to performing. You get a lot of love, you get applause at the end of the day. Um, and you're up there and you're talking. It's all about you. So I can understand why a lot of performers do end up teaching. A lot of showbiz people end up teaching. It's closely related to what we do. Connecting with people.
So, how do you like having that label attached to you, the grand influencer?
I don't mind it. The person who started me in this, a young woman who at that time was in her 30s, she was offended by it. Uh, she said they only apply to women, not to men, which is already telling us something that is a little demeaning. It's a little less than, I don't want to say dignified. She objected to it uh, because she said your you has what you are has nothing to do with your age. You're you because you're you, not because you're old. But I don't mind it. Whatever works. If it gets me an audience, if it gets me maybe a brand that I can make money from, I can live with it. I mean, there are a lot of things that are slightly insulting when you're an older person. You're just a young kid. You wouldn't know this yet. But a lot of my fans, and they mean well. People will tell me that I'm so cute, that I'm so adorable. I secretly am offended by that language because I'm not a puppy and I'm not a toddler. You say cute and adorable about little kids or little dogs that are doing something you wouldn't. Oh, look, he made potty. How cute. Oh, look, he used a fork. How cute. I am an accomplished, experienced woman who's acquired a lot of wisdom in my life. When I talk, I've got something really worth hearing. So to me, calling me cute and adorable, it's a little demeaning. I know they don't mean it that way, but you understand what I'm saying?
I do. I absolutely do. So, what do you prefer to be called? How do you prefer to be described?
Well, I'll give you an example. I'm in a restaurant with my husband, and this young waiter comes up and says to him, "Would you care for a cocktail, sir?" And then he turns to me and he says, "And how about you, young lady?" And again, calling me, a woman in my age, a young lady, it's kind of ick. It's kind of condescending. So I think in that, if he's calling him sir, I don't know, he should call me ma'am, right? What would
Absolutely.
you like, sir? And how about you, ma'am? That would be the equivalent. Whatever it is, I want the equivalent of what the men get. The men are not called cute and adorable.
Although same lies, I've always thought it was weird, like always from the time I was as far back as I can remember, that women, older women, are called young, like 86 years young.
Oh, yeah, right.
And I'm thinking, what at what age
Exactly.
do you cross that threshold?
That's interesting. I never thought about that, but you're absolutely right. That thing of young lady, because people are so uncomfortable about age. They don't know how to deal with it. They're embarrassed by it. They're kind of weirded out by it. And so I think they get uncomfortable around it. They don't know how to treat, or in this country, this doesn't happen everywhere. Certainly doesn't happen in Asia or in Latin America, where older people are revered and respected and listened to. Um, but in this country, age is such an odd subject. People just haven't come to terms with it. Although I will say, I think that's changing. My audience
Hmm.
on TikTok is very young. That's the last thing I ever expected. When I get stopped in the street, which happens quite often, it's by 20 somethings or even younger. So they have found something in me and they're not as ageist as the people I grew up with, and they don't mind listening. They're perfectly happy to be my fans, to listen to me, to relate to me. So maybe that's something that's, maybe that's a good trend.
Okay, so that leads right into my next question. So, why does a 15-year-old Afghan boy identify with a
Ah,
6-year-old Jewish American woman?
I know, isn't that amazing? That was to explain to the audience, that was my favorite comment I've ever gotten. He wrote on TikTok, he said, I do not understand why I am so uh I forget what the word was, but why I'm so enthralled by a Jewish American woman in her 80s. I am a 16-year-old Afghan boy. I really love that. That just made my year to hear that. You know something? I've been trying to figure this out, Melvin. I can't tell you. When I asked the kids who saw me, I said, "What is it? Why are you listening to me? Why are you?" And they say the word they use a lot is authentic, because you're authentic. And I think by that they mean that they know that I'm honest, that they can trust. I say what I think. There's no, we can't use language on this, but there's no
BS.
cow dung. There's no cow dung. I, I, I am totally honest about my opinions. I always have been in my life. And I've always been criticized for it. I've always been told I'm too opinionated, I'm too talkative. I've always apologized for that. I've always been told those were unattractive qualities in a woman, and guess what? Now I'm being celebrated for the same qualities that I used to apologize for. And I'll tell you, if somebody would say to me now, Annie, you talk a lot, I would not apologize. I would say, you're absolutely right. And you know something? You should listen to what I have to say. You might get something out of it. Which reminds me, in my book, The Book of Annie, Humor, Heart, and Chutzpah from an Accidental Influencer, one of my themes has to do with that. One of my themes is, and I wonder if you can relate to this, do not let, how shall I say, do not be poisoned by other people's negative opinions of you. Do not be poisoned by other. I believed everybody all my life who told me that I was too this and too that, too talkative, too opinionated, too blunt. And now I've discovered that that's one of my best qualities. That's what's giving me all this attention and success right now. Why did I spend almost all my life apologizing for that? And I think we all do that, especially when we're young. We want to please, we want to be popular. If somebody says, you do this, you should change this. You should, oh yeah, I want to fit in. I want to be liked. I don't do that anymore. It's one of the great things about growing older. I apologize for nothing. If I want to wear socks with sandals, I will wear socks with sandals. If I want to wear elastic weight pants, I will break all the patches. I do not care about the rules anymore. And that's very free. It's very liberating.
It absolutely is. I'm in my late 50s, and one of the things I
Oh,
learned
you're a kid. You're a kid.
one of the things I've learned in probably the last 10 years or so is other people's opinions of me are none of my business.
That's a good way of putting it. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's none of their business, actually.
Yes. But they can think whatever they want. I don't care. I
Yeah.
don't have to live up or down to whatever their
You're
expectations are.
absolutely right. But it takes a lot of courage to realize that, because we all want to be loved, and we want to please, and we want to be popular. So, how did you reach that? What made you reach that? How did you get strong enough to reach that point?
Some very tough life situations, and I realized I can't go one by one and try to correct the narrative about me. So I just have to live. And then people will either make adjustments or they will they'll do whatever they want. I have to do what I need to do to
Absolutely. And I like that you talk about tough life situations, because we all go through those. You can't live without going through some hell at some point. And I worry a little bit about the youngest generation. I don't think people are allowed to fail anymore. They're not allowed to fail. They're not allowed to say, nobody says to them, this is not good enough. You got to do better. Everybody gets a a gold star, right? Um, I would tell you, Melvin, that maybe some of the worst things that ever happened to me ended up in some ways being the best things that ever happened to me in terms of what I learned from them, how they changed me, how I survived them, how I got stronger, smarter, wiser. I wouldn't want to go through it again, but everything you go through, including failure, is a learning op.
I agree 100%. So, since you're in the influencer world, you probably have heard the term demure being used a lot recently. Do you
Yeah,
ever
let's.
consider do you ever consider yourself in any way to be demure?
I've gotten that comment. I get these comments from these young kids. I do not know the language. I got to go and look them up and Google and say, "What is this slang?" She said, "Oh, you really ate that." Well, I don't know what that means. I got to look up. I can't tell you the words I've had to look up. Demure is one of them, and I'm not still not exactly sure. I know it's something good, right? It's something flattering, but could you do you know exactly what it
Well,
means?
the traditional definition would be
Oh,
somebody
I
who's
know
sort
the
of a
tradition.
that yeah, you're that's what I'm saying.
It's
You're
the
not really
opposite.
that. It's the
It's
opposite of
the
that now.
opposite of what I am, right? But I have heard that. Demure, what's another one? Oh God, I can't remember. I get queen. Well, I know the words. I get queen, iconic, diva. Those I know. Um, I'm losing it now, but I do hear a lot of. I've learned this part of the fun of this adventures. I've learned a lot of new language and new things about our culture.
Learning is part of the life experience, and there's always something new to learn. So,
Absolutely.
so which TikTok videos get the most traction for you? Are they generally personal or more humorous stories?
Well, my famous one, the one that went viral right away, was one about Krispy Kreme, where I point out that it's not crispy. I don't know why that went. I mean, by now it's had millions. Actually, somebody wrote me that they saw somewhere it's had billions of views because people
Wow.
share it where I don't know they share it on other platforms. Um, and that was totally accidental. But yes, food and drink is a lot. Show me in a cafe, and if I show you what I'm eating and what I'm drinking, that gets a lot. But you know something, as much as people would like it to be, it is not rocket science. You really can't predict. I'm sometimes surprised at things I think are really important and really powerful that get very little traffic. And then something I just put up there because I have no material that day and I just throw something up that I think is meaningless and it gets a million viewers. So I don't think it's an exact science. I think, Melvin, and I would say this to everybody, no matter what you're doing as an artist, you just have to speak your truth. You speak your truth, and somewhere, somehow, people will respond. You don't know exactly what they will respond to, when they will, but if you, is again, that word authentic, if you're your true self, your real self, you will find an audience.
Well, let's come back to your book for a second. 'Cause there's
Yay!
a person in particular that you talked about in your book that I want to discuss. Your friend Pamela. So it sounds like she was
Oh,
very important to you, even though she hated garlic and you found that hard to accept.
well, it just shows you that you don't always know somebody. I'm a very judgy person. And I maybe too much so, and I make snap judgments. And I met this woman, and I knew she was not for me. I'm a, as you see what I am, right? I'm this big mouth New York woman originally from the Bronx. She was this very polite, very ladylike Protestant Midwestern who is the kind of woman who dots her I's, crosses her T's, wore pearls and navy blazers. And I had to be friendly with her because she married a good friend of ours. But I did not ever think that we could have a real relationship. And then somehow, uh, we got to, I don't know how to say it. She was a professor, so she knew a lot of stuff. So sometimes I would call her just to ask. I said, Pam, it's Annie. Can you tell me what did people eat for breakfast in the Middle Ages? I'm just curious. And I realized that she was very valuable. She was so knowledgeable that I started to like her a little more. And she wrote novels. She wrote historical novels, and I felt obliged to read one. And I read what she wrote, and I got a whole different picture of her because the book was naughty and sexy and juicy and dirty. It was the last thing I expected from this very polite and correct, ladylike
Demure.
Midwestern
She was
lady.
probably demure.
Really demure in the old, exactly. And we started to be real friends. And she encouraged me to write. She was my first person who encouraged me, and she encouraged me to be active. Every time I spoke to her, she would say, "So tell me, Annie, what are you working on?" And she kind of shamed me into working on stuff. It took me a long time to really commit to being an active professional rather than just an mostly unemployed actress. So she's somebody that in a million years I would not have figured would be one of my best friends. And I miss her to this day. But has that ever happened to you that you just make a judgment of somebody and then suddenly realize that you were totally wrong?
Yes. Well, it's with not necessarily a friendship, but I worked the last couple of years as a substitute teacher in a high school, and
Oh boy.
there's some students who rubbed me the wrong way in first blush, and then we ended up having a close relationship as a student and
Wow.
teacher, and they became some of my
Wow.
favorite students. And one
Oh,
one kid in
wow.
particular, he was just rude in the beginning, and then one day I asked him how he was doing. It looked like he was down, and I asked him how he was doing, and he told me that his dog was sick and he thought he was going to die. And
Oh,
so, just opening up that conversation, then every
there
day
you
after that, he
go.
would come and start telling me about things that he was dealing with in his life, and that he didn't quite know how to deal
Yeah.
with them, didn't know how to process
Mm,
those things, and he became one of my
right.
favorite students.
Incredible. I love that. I love that. I know we do have to try and force ourselves to look past the surface, right? I saw this blonde lady in pearls and a navy blazer, and I thought, "Uh-oh, I'm getting out of here." And I was wrong. That was superficial stuff. It wasn't who she really was.
What's one of your
Um,
favorite stories about Pamela?
oh my goodness, you really uh you're you're trapping me here. I
Okay,
don't mean
let
trapping.
me rephrase the question. What's something that you miss the most about her?
We would have phone calls, I would say at least once or twice a week, and we would talk about everything. First, it would start with the big things, a little bit about politics. She was much more into politics than I was, so I would have to allow that. Then we would talk about books, we would talk about movies, we would talk about TV shows, we would talk about theater. Then we would talk about family. I knew all of her family, her husband, her kids, her stepkids, and she knew mine. So we would talk a lot about family, but not in a superficial way, but in a real, like what you just said about the kid, like what's going on, what's wrong, what's the problem, how do we deal with this new crisis now? Because, if you have a big family, there's always somebody in crisis, right?
Hmm.
And, and then at the end, she would, as I say, she would say, "So what are you working on?" And she would encourage me about my work. I would say, "Well, I'm doing this, but I'm stuck." And she said, "Well, why don't you try this?" Or da da da. And so she was my mentor, really. She was the person who encouraged me to write. Uh, and as luck would have it, I managed to pay her back for all that she did for me because at one point she didn't like her agent anymore. And my agent, my literary agent in New York, is also a good friend. And I said, "I think you should meet Julia." And I introduced her to my agent, and Julia said to me, She'll never take me. I've only been in business for a year. She was one of the top agents in London. She's an experienced published writer. Why would she take me? And she went to Julia, and Julia was honest. Said to her, Pam, I don't know if we're a good match. I think you're kind of above my pay grade. And Pam said, if Annie recommended you, I want you. And that began a terrific relationship and friendship for them. They sold books. Pam had a book that was a bestseller. They were good friends. And like me, they talked all the time. So that made me, sometimes you feel you want to have a sense of payback. If someone has done a lot for you, you want to do something for them, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in your
Yeah.
book, you talk a lot about Jewish stereotypes that you seem to embrace. So what's some of your favorite things about being Jewish?
Oh, my favorite thing. I thought you were going to talk about the ugly Jewish stereotypes, which I'm not very fond of, especially about Jewish women, like I was saying before. They're ugly, they're obnoxious, they're demanding, they're materialistic. And I see those to this day. I see those stereotypes on television and in movies. When it's the Jewish woman, there's always something negative about that woman. It's amazing how we have not moved away. It's like it's the last thing, it's the last racial, if you can say racial, stereotype that it seems to be okay to
Hmm.
exploit. Sorry, I don't understand. What? My phone is talking to me. Why is that? I turned it off.
It's got something to say.
Um, and what should I say? What I like about being Jewish, okay, I'm going to give you an example. When I was growing up in the Bronx, and this is another theme from my books. When I was growing up in the Bronx, I grew up in a strictly Jewish, working class neighborhood, right? And the motto was there was, and this came out of fear, stick with your own kind. Well, when I grew up, I neglected that. I totally discarded that. My friends are all kinds, right? They're Jewish, they're Christian, they're this, they're that, they're white, they're black, they're gay, they're that. And I feel that my life has become much richer from that. But I will say, starting out as a Jewish woman, as a Jew in America, you always feel like an outsider. And I would
Hmm.
say, for the most part, all my friends, no matter what they are, have that outsider thing going for them. So that
Hmm.
we never feel we're part of the mainstream. We never feel anybody's going to call us, you're a typical American. We're not. And whatever defines us, because we're gay, because we're trans, because we're black, because whatever. Uh, so it's like a band of outsiders. It's a group of outsiders, which has really enriched my life. I feel very fortunate that I have the kind of diverse social circle that I do. I feel sorry for people who don't. I had a country house 2 hours north of New York City. I asked the local guy who ran the little general store, Ralph, have you ever been to Manhattan? And he says, with great pride, he says, nope, I've never left the county. And he's proud of
Wow.
that. I don't get that. I don't get that lack of curiosity, that lack of, I don't know what you would call it. Why limit yourself to always live in the same place, to always be with the same kinds of people? I find that scary, creepy, to tell you the truth. But anyway, so being a Jew, being an outsider, and also, I have to say, there's a certain humor in Jewish culture that I have exploited. There's a certain humor, there's a certain comedy timing. You know, in America, a lot of our great comics were Jewish, and so they kept that kind of that there's a certain rhythm to American humor that you don't get in other cultures, and that's a Jewish rhythm.
Hmm. Is that sort of a way of dealing with trauma, do you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. They say that comedy comes from pain. And I think that's absolutely true. Uh, I don't know. I'm thinking offhand if there have been too many great American comics that came from a rich white Protestant background. Can you think of any? I'm
No,
not sure.
I was just thinking that's
Actually,
what.
I think Robin Williams was, oddly enough. I think he came from a kind of
Hmm.
upper class, but most comics come from some kind of outsider place. Um, and definitely Jewish humor is a way of deflecting pain. Absolutely. And I much appreciate that.
Yeah, black comedians and Jewish comedians definitely have a lot in common.
Totally. And they are, and you see them sitting together at those Knicks games.
So a lot of these stories are contained in your book, and I highly recommend for all my listeners to grab a copy or two of your book and share it with their friends. So how can they get a copy of the book?
Oh, it's on Amazon, both the print and the screen. What do they call it?
The
The
ebook,
reader, the ebook and the
audiobook.
audiobook. Or you can
Yes.
order. Some people I discovered. Some people will say, "I won't shop on Amazon. Where else can I get it?" Some people deliberately, and you can order it at Barnes and Noble. You can get it at Barnes and Noble. I wanted to say something also talking about themes. When you asked me about Seinfeld, when you asked me about TikTok, these moments that have made a big difference in my life, they happen because I believe in, and I tell everybody this, the power of yeah, why not? When something odd is suggested to you and you're really not sure how you feel about it, I'm saying to people, say, yeah, why not? When it was suggested to me that I go on TikTok, I thought it was the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Who would want to see me on TikTok? But then I thought, what can I lose? I said, yeah, why not? And I went viral very quickly. When it was suggested that I audition for Seinfeld, another actress turned it down. She said, oh, I never heard of the show. It's only a couple of lines. Why bother? And I thought, well, it's a day's work. Yeah, why not? That show's changed my life professionally. So I think a lot of us, I don't regret anything I've ever done. I only regret the things I haven't done. So it's another theme of the book. Say, yeah, why not? That's how I got married, actually.
And that
I
story's in
met
your
my
book.
husband. I asked my husband in February on a blind date. We got married in April because he was Danish. He needed his green card. And I thought, yeah, why not? I think this is going to work. And that was 61 years ago.
Well, congratulations. So 61 years.
Yeah, thank you.
So
Some days,
go ahead.
yeah. No, you say congratulations. That some days I feel you should say, oh, poor you.
Okay. My condolences on today.
Condolences. Right.
Well, I was going to ask for a bit of advice to leave with the listeners, but it sounds like that was your advice. Do you have any other advice you'd like to leave?
It was that thing of other people's opinions, saying, yeah, why not? And not listening to everything you're told as a child, the way I was told, stick with your own kind. Move out there, be a little adventurous, be a little curious about the world that you don't know. You might get a lot out of it. And also never shop retail, ever. Just shoes and underwear, that's it. Go to your thrift stores, recycle, go to your thrift stores, go to yard sales, go to estate sales. Do not go to, well, I'm not going to say. People spend much, much, much too much money on crap that they don't need and that's overpriced and evil for the environment.
There you go, being demure again.
Yeah. Right.
Well, Annie, this has been a fun conversation. I really appreciate having you as a guest today.
I can't believe how well prepared you were. You know my background more better
Well,
than I do.
well, that's one of the things that I enjoy about this show the most. Getting to research each guest and surprising
Wow.
them with a question or two that they hadn't thought about in years. That's really fun.
You're doing a good job, Melvin. I'm coming to Texas. What's for dinner?
Well, I'm
Except
down
you.
near San Antonio, so Mexican food and barbecue are the big things here.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Just say
Sounds good to
when.
me.
Just say when.
Okay.
Well, thanks again for being here today. I enjoyed this conversation.
My pleasure. Take care.
So our guest today has been TikTok star and author of the Book of Annie Korzen. Thanks for being here today. Please go to my website at podcastreallife.com for more information about my guests and the things we discussed today. That's it for today's episode of Stories from Real Life. Join us again next time for another chance to learn from each other. Until then, don't forget to shine your light wherever you go.